start with stanza 1, it goes, all the doorways before one enters should be looked around, should be spied out. It can't be known for certain where enemies are sitting in the hall ahead. Blessed be the givers, a guest has come in. Where is he going to sit? He's in great haste, the one who by the log stack is going to try his luck. Fire is needful for someone who's come in and who's chilled to the knee. Food and clothing are necessary for the man who's journeyed over the mountains. Water is needful for someone who comes to a meal. A towel and a warm welcome, a friendly disposition if he could get it, speech and silence in return.
This is, I think, one of my favorite things about the old poems and the old, as we were talking about before, the value system of small communities, which is like right from the outset, the very first stanzas are specifically about hospitality and like, blessed be the givers. It's not like, it's almost like you are, it's good for you to get a guest because then you can like show the virtue of hospitality. It's all about, give him your clothes and your food. And actually this is an opportunity for you to show how virtuous you are by being a good host. And I think that's lovely because that's one of the small community values that I think you experience when you visit, villages or foreign countries that we tend to lack in modern culture a bit more, where we have this vast global community, but you never really get that opportunity to show your own ability and hospitality by welcoming someone into your house when all you can do is
especially not the minute.
Yeah. Very illegal.
Certainly not at the minute. But that's bang on because even just down to, I don't think people share anymore as well. People are so kind of introverted and want to keep everything to themselves and it's mine. They're so worried of somebody else stealing their idea or stealing something, or it just feels like everybody's gone inwards rather than wanting to share with people and look after each other.
There's something about these fleeting interactions that we have with people in like big cities and all that stuff, right? Very little of that is ever, there comes a lot of suspicion with those kinds of interactions, and there are no ties that are established. Like nobody is responsible for much more than that moment. Then you can go on in each direction. Yeah. And as long as nobody screwed up completely, then everybody gets out of that situation unscathed, so to speak, right?
Yeah, and it could be just, I guess you could do something and you just that arsehole on the bus earlier.
Exactly.
And you're probably never going to see them again. Whereas if it was a small community, you have to look each other in the face every day and they know if you've been a cunt or not.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's a whole amount of being held accountable that actually being in a smaller community or like any actual physical community. Whereas, like you say, you could be as much of a douchebag as you want on the internet, and no one will ever hold you accountable for it. Which is why so much of our life is spent arguing with trolls. So we've gone from fighting trolls to arguing with trolls over the course of about 1,000 years.
Those pesky trolls.
It's always going to be the issue. But I really like that as a starting point. Like you said, like Havamal is such a long poem and therefore important. Yet the whole thing opens with him, a bit a call to arms regarding hospitality. And
absolutely, yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. Shall I go on?
Let's carry on.
Please.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm loving it.
So we're now at stanza 5, and it goes, wits are needful for someone who wanders widely. Anything will pass at home. He becomes a laughingstock, the man who knows nothing and sits among the wise. About his intelligence, no man should be boastful, rather cautious of mind. When a wise and silent man comes to a homestead, blame seldom befalls the wary, for no more dependable friend can a man ever get than a store of common sense. The careful guest who comes to a meal keeps silent, with hearing finely attuned. He listens with his ears and looks about with his eyes, so every wise man spies out what's ahead. He's lucky, the man who can get himself praise and goodwill. Very difficult it is when a man lays claim to what's in another's breast. He's lucky, the man who keeps in himself praise and wit while he lives, for bad advice men have often received from another's breast. No better a burden a man bears on the road than a store of common sense. Better than riches it will seem in an unfamiliar place, such is the resort of the wretched. No better burden a man bears on the road than a store of common sense. No worse journey provision could he carry over the plain than overmuch drinking of ale. It isn't as good as it is said to be, ale for the sons of men. For the more a man drinks, the less he knows about his own mind.
And now we see the first shred of evidence that Odin is getting drunk.
Yeah,
He's
right.
Very like, he starts off being like, you must be welcoming to people. Like, blessed is he, like very Jesus. Blessed is he who gets to welcome others to his breast. And then 5 minutes later, he's like, but I tell you one thing, you shouldn't drink. It's not so good ale. People
that's
say
the hospitality.
It's not so good. You don't want that ale. Here, I'll take it from you. It's not as good as you think.
let me make sure you.
Yeah, I'll look after this ale for you.
That's it. They were too nice to him. They gave him too much.
Yep.
Yeah,
I like the emphasis on common sense as well.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something we are lacking in modern times.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's he says, you know, a couple of things about what is common sense, and I think the core of it is to always be cautious with what you do. Like, just don't overreach, you know, in different ways. Like that seems to be sort of a general thing that he comes back to again and again. And that you know, in my opinion, that's sort of like it comes down to something that we are definitely lacking nowadays, broadly in society, humility.
Mm-hmm.
These people who came up with this seem to be a little more humble about their abilities, a little less boastful, a little less I could definitely handle this, la 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 la, you know.
yeah.
But I think social media has something to blame for that, because everybody sees everybody doing amazing things on Instagram or on Facebook. So it is kind of, I mean, Instagram in particular is just this place to flex and show what you have. Like, look at my watch, or look at where I've been today, or look what I'm doing, look what I've made. And it's very much an egotistical kind of self-masturbatory. That's probably the best word I've ever said on here.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Not as good as flaneur, but yeah, it's pretty good.
but it is that kind of thing, is where everybody wants to show off. So you kind of have to keep it with the Joneses almost.
For sure, but I think again it comes back to the difference in small time and large time culture, which is people I think would be less boastful because they have to back their shit up, because you can't just brag about something because the next day they'll be like, all right, let's see you do it. Whereas you can flex on Instagram all day long and no one's ever going to actually, you never have to back that up. You never have to prove you can do it. Right. So again, like being part of a non-culture, which is what we seem to be in now, allows you to be self-masturbatory.
Yeah, you can get a good angle and no one's ever going to really question it.
Yeah, you know, get the lighting right, you know, get your hands in the right position. Sorry, what are you talking about?
Well, you've got a point.
That I do. Not as big as they say. But yeah, when what you're it's already descended into smut.
It's a pornography. That's what it is.
Well, it's inevitable. It's inevitable. With the drunken, I might start just a whole new brand, Drunken Odin.
I am starting to like this idea. We need to brainstorm here.
We'll do this. But I love this bit in that bit that you just read out, Matthias. Because he's all about common sense and so on, and he talks about knowledge and how like knowledge is pretty much the best thing you can have, but also don't be like bragging about your knowledge, because I mean, as we see in some of the myths, someone will brag about the knowledge, then someone will call them on it, and then all of a sudden they're in like a wisdom off, and whoever loses dies, and it's like, oh, shouldn't have said how wise you were. Now you don't have a head, which is, or someone else is like wearing your head, or they've pickled it or something. But my favorite bit, like Dan said, is how it talks about knowledge, but it always errs towards the common sense side, because in this day and age, like knowledge is so prevalent and so it's sort of easy to come by because of we have the internet, right? And so this strange, we're sort of conditioned to believe that having more knowledge or more consideration of things is in some way better for us. You know, if you have a decision to make, take a long time over it, gather all the knowledge you can, and this is a better way to make a decision. Whereas in actuality, a lot of the time, from my own understanding, the more information you present, you gather to yourself when trying to make a decision, the worse that decision ends up being, because you get rid of billions of years of evolution and replace it with the internet, and all of a sudden your brain goes and can't do it anymore. And so I think there's a lot to be learned from not trying to gather too much knowledge now that knowledge is so easy to come by. Whereas back then, knowledge was something you only got from like poetry or books. So you wanted to take as much of it on, and then you can make better decisions. Whereas nowadays we have so much knowledge, we have too much knowledge, that a lot of us can't make decisions anymore because we're paralyzed, because you can't make any choice without being confronted with 1,000 other options, and you don't know enough to know whether they're good options or not. And so you make terrible decisions all the time, or at least I do. So
you had to rely on...
You're making a really good point. I mean, we call this the information age, and obviously what we're dealing with is a lot of disinformation, a lot of misinformation, a lot of fucking about with your information, basically.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And that is incredibly confusing, right? Because and especially also if you find yourself if you attach yourself to something that you perceive as dependable sources of information, and all of a sudden these so-called dependable sources of information it takes you in like the direction of bullshit. And like, I mean, the mess that we're in this country right now is a great example of that.
Yeah, like the direction of bullshit is an excellent like for the zeitgeist of the whole. I spent some time in the direction of bullshit. I agree. I know that old saying, like, knowledge is power, and my favorite retort to that ever is the idea that knowledge is power, but the minute you understand how a placebo works, it stops working. So all of a sudden, a drug you could take that would cure you no longer can cure you because you understand that it's a placebo. So in this situation, knowledge is not power. Knowledge has broken you, or at least made you unable to heal. So I think that's a lovely analogy for the idea that more knowledge isn't necessarily, or more information certainly isn't necessarily useful or a good thing. Like our ancestors knew one thing, and that was they didn't have as much knowledge, but they got by understanding how things worked, not necessarily understanding all the gubbins of what was going on behind it. They just knew if they did this would happen. They didn't need to necessarily know why.
People specialized in their own little area, I guess, as well. You know, you'd have
that's true.
You'd have your blacksmith or the medicine man, I assume, and whatever else. Whereas now it's kind of everybody wants to do everything, and if you can, you just go on YouTube, and YouTube tells you how to do it.
Yeah, and then it blows up.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's true. I mean, that's also a very good point. I think we're all trying to basically reach over too much and collect too many skills. But it's also what we also have is, of course, a world where you're being basically prodded in and told that you need to be able to be this like very perfect full human being with you need to be a scholar and a mechanic and
married before 25 or you get fucking cinnamon.
You gotta be married before 25.
God forbid if it's before 30 because
the peppers
come out.
It's true, right? Because you get confronted with all these, I guess, like we keep saying about social media and so on, kind of beats you over the head with your own inadequacy constantly, and all of a sudden you can be fantastic at something and flip on social media like, my jiu-jitsu chokes aren't up to scratch, I'm a failure. You're like, what are you talking about? You're a freaking
absolutely. It has its good sides and it has its bad sides to it.